I wish there was a mouth hole for this.
A what?
A mouth hole.
That's pretty good though. It looks like AR. It looks
well,
like
this is Jack Nicholson Joker.
yeah.
That's the only Joker, in my opinion.
That is the only Joker. Did you see that there's the new Batman's going to be Michael Keaton in the Flash movie?
Did see that.
No.
Yeah, no, it's a big deal.
I'm not on the DC comic chat boards like you are.
All right, so let me just take one little picture here.
I thought you were going to say, let me just take this off.
All right, now I'll take it off.
There he is.
Okay, now we're going to wait for a couple minutes for some people to come on. Gentlemen, I'm going to start. Why don't we do a little bit of intros, and we'll start with the topic, and we'll get going. So thank you, everybody, for coming on. This is David Paul. I'm the managing director at DWP Capital. We're a vertical SaaS and tech-enabled service investor, servicing companies that are in market with products but are looking for, $3 to $5 million, and I'm looking for a lead investor. Today, I am talking to two of my colleagues and friends that are both investors and operators, and they are talking about in 2023, what does it look like to go to market? The last couple of years has been nothing but a frenzy of dollars going into the systems. People were buying tools left and right, and it seemed all pretty easy. And now it's not. The economy's contracting, and things need to change. And for the benefit of all the founders and entrepreneurs and operators who are going to be on this LinkedIn Live, please use this as an opportunity to ask questions. You could use it in the chat box, which is on the side here, and we'll answer questions after kind of the presentation. So with that, I'm going to leave it to our guests, Justin Gray from In Revenue Capital and Anthony Kennada from AudiencePlus. Why don't we start with you, Justin?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good intro in and of itself. Justin Gray, I'm the general partner over at In Revenue Capital. We are a new kind of venture capital firm. We're kind of pioneering what I'm calling operator immersive capital. We focus primarily on seed stage organizations, but in addition to capital allocation, we actually step in from an operator perspective, an operator background as it pertains to go-to-market, and actually participate within our investments, helping them ramp up go-to-market and really achieve kind of go-to-market fit to complement what they have in product market fit. So, David, thanks for having me.
Of course.
Awesome. Anthony Kennada, I'm the co-founder and CEO of AudiencePlus. I've spent the last, 12 years, I think it is, building marketing teams, leading marketing teams in enterprise SaaS companies. Most of that experience was at a company called Gainsight, coming in super early, pre-revenue, scaling that to about 100 million of ARR, kind of helping build a market category around customer success. Went on to a company called Front, and then most recently a company called Hopin. And made that kind of jump to founder. Heard 2023 is a great year to start a company, which I know it is, but obviously a lot of interesting headwinds along the way. But it's been fun and so good to take a lot of the best practices of what we've learned in terms of building an audience, using thought leadership to engage that audience, and ultimately monetize and grow pipeline in a way that's much more efficient than kind of the traditional B2B tactics. And so we're trying to build a platform to help power this for B2B marketing teams. We're still sort of stealth and talking about that, but we've been spending a lot of time the last 5 months marketing this problem set and helping resource the community that's thinking about driving efficient growth through owned media. So excited to be here, excited to talk about this and all things efficient growth with you too.
Awesome. So Anthony, why do you look better? You have a better camera, or are you just better looking?
Yesterday, we did a podcast yesterday together, and I wore a hat and looked like, I don't know, like I was wearing
you just look clear, real chiseled facial features. You're good. You're just a good looking guy.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
We have a little studio set up here. Actually probably just down the street from where we met yesterday. But yeah, got a, SLR, got a couple lights, got some stuff in the background. So trying to do the media company thing.
Awesome. So Justin, now when we talk about operator capital and kind of what's going on in today's B2B environment, How are you seeing the market shifting from a time where budgets were once bountiful and now they're contracting? And like, what are you seeing in the market today is kind of where the puck is going?
I thought you were going to start off by asking me how dashingly handsome I am, but we can go in that direction as well.
Why does your haircut look like Count Dracula?
That's what's in style these days.
Got it. Okay. I like it.
So getting back to the question here. So I think you kind of alluded to it. There's been a lot of, and I hate to rehash things that are almost like kind of beating a dead horse here, but growth at all costs has very much been what has been in, right? Like whatever, and this goes across the board from employee comp plans to lead acquisition to, like we're going to make all of this investment and it's eventually going to pay off down the road, right? And it's kind of a race to the bottom in that regard. And I think with the economic shift and all the other factors that are, coming off COVID and so on, quite frankly, when that funding, money starts to get more expensive, those economics just don't work, right? And so, as you're bidding on higher cost per leads and clicks and so on and so forth, like the budgets just aren't there to support that. And so you're seeing like a very real problem emerge, which is, if we don't just have more money to throw at things and bigger teams and more software, and we can get into a whole diatribe about like, the vast amount of software that's gone into sales and marketing over the last decade plus. I think the real question is fundamentally, has that led to better? Has that led to something that is predictable in terms of customer relationships, lifetime value? And I think predominantly the answer is no, right? And so you're kind of seeing this gut check moment to where folks are saying, what is next? Like if I don't have this endless war chest to throw at this problem, if I don't just, if I can't convert to this new technology, and that's going to be the key. We've had the shiny object syndrome for so long. And at the end of the day, like now you need to either acquire customers or grow your existing client base in a way that supports growth and valuation and value within the organization. And quite frankly, that's a really hard problem that I think has been kicked down the road for a long time in terms of, that next thing, so on and so forth. Like everyone is now asking themselves, what do we do to solve for these really fundamental problems?
Yeah. And so like fundamentally we have like three, and talking in the world of SaaS, which is kind of where we all live and breathe, we've got longer sales cycles, right? We have seat contraction and we have churn. It's like the three horsemen of death, right? And when you're on a plan and everyone was underwriting a plan that, had, net dollar retention going up, churn being low, and sales cycles being a certain time, you start, changing those variables, the models get turned around. So, I mean, Anthony, from a B2B marketing perspective, like how do you like really kind of reframe and come to that honest gut check of like what's not working, and how do you think about kind of pulling yourself out of that and rethinking about your strategy in general as an operator?
Yeah, I mean, marketers are given those three horsemen also having less resources to actually influence those outcomes. Given, I think, we're frankly, when you think about the overall kind of CAC mix, marketing gets kind of bucketed into this idea of discretionary for the most part, because a lot of our spend can be throttled up or down. And it's a bit different than obviously building a sales force or a sales team. So I think marketers are stressed. We're anxious about this because while our resources have been, throttled down, expectations are still high. We have to like run into the wind and still be able to create pipeline for our sales teams. Still have to be able to support customer success given kind of the corporate initiatives around churn and how we can kind of help mitigate. So I think that the piece of the kind of the thought process kind of coming into this has to be, well, look, we can't keep doing the same thing we're doing. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I think that's the first kind of realization. Some of that is being forced on us in terms of spend and kind of commitments to some initiatives that have already been in flight. But then kind of bringing this healthy kind of first principles kind of perspective of, all right, well, what can we do? What sort of, what are the superpowers of marketing, and what are the ways that we can shift our attention? And if it's not going to be purely on, rapidly scaling customer acquisition, how can we develop relationship with target accounts who are also struggling, by the way, within this market? How can we deliver value and kind of be perceived as a thought partner, a strategic partner with some of these other companies, certainly with our customers as well. So I think while there's obviously a lot of like doom and gloom headlines, and it obviously is, extremely difficult, for marketers, for sales professionals, CS folks, I think there's a bit of like opportunity in here for us to try new things, not new things that are going to be big bets that the CFO, is going to like shoot down, but like things that are more intuitive and focused on value exchange and value delivery in support of our sales and customer success teams. That's where I would start thinking about kind of the evolving role of marketing in this kind of economic climate.
Yeah. And so, I mean, like I think about it from a board level perspective, right? Because I mean, I guess the good news and the bad news is that everyone is suffering from the same problem, right? I mean, the market, floats and ebbs, everybody the same way. And so how would you balance thinking about, hey, you know what? We don't need to grow as fast as we, thought we had to. And, and maybe as opposed to 150% growth rate, we can spend less money and get to 75% and, preserve some equity value versus like, all right, what else can we do to try to lower our CAC and maintain the same growth rate? Like, how do you balance those two things?
Yeah. Well, I think every board's gonna have a different point of view, and there might be some context for specific companies. But what I would say is, I think there is this appreciation of, you opened with this, right? Growth at all costs kind of moving away. Boards being a bit more comfortable with kind of a lower growth rates year on year. And the name of the game is more around capital efficiency and whatnot. What comes to mind for me, I'd love, Justin, obviously your point of view on this is the focus on churn, on retention, and thinking about how that is bubbling up in sort of, economic seasons like this as one of, if not the most important metric for companies to be focused on. It's not to say we're not going to grow at all, but sort of protecting the base does feel like a strategic imperative. Every SaaS company, regardless of stage, is kind of thinking through right now.
Well, that's the crazy thing there, right? Like, I've predominantly built and run bootstrap businesses in the past, which is funny that now I'm in the venture capital world. But when you're running a business where you don't have some of those exterior pressures that tend to be so focused on net new logo acquisition, like you naturally look at things like maintaining a healthy bottom line, retaining clients, expanding into those organizations, right? Like those are all levers that are kind of equally weighted. And I think the strange thing for me to see, just kind of, sitting back and not having, a board of investors to go back and report to historically, is how strange that myopic focus has been on what new logos have you won this month. Like we've got to keep that up. We got to keep this train rolling. And, having been in professional services as well, I've seen firsthand like 40 to 60% churn rates at organizations that everyone is saying is like the latest darling, and oh, this technology is so awesome and crazy and everyone needs it. At the same time, like there's tons of organizations that weren't adopting those technologies and weren't seeing value, and we're struggling with really fundamental things like how do we get onboarded and launched on this X piece of software. And so those are just kind of like, I think, blind spots that have really been exposed now, that again, that war chest is not overflowing, and we can't just keep focusing on what is maybe a bit sexier. I think the story of landing a decent mid to enterprise logo and growing that 2 to 3x in expansion in the first 24 months, that's like the sexiest thing that I could have ever done as a business owner, because that's the lowest cost of additional growth that I could have, right? But that's where I've always been a bit confused about like that singular focus on net new logo acquisition.
I think that's such an important reminder. I'm smiling because it came up in our board meeting of like this idea of like business is supposed to be hard. Like this is what we're supposed to do. This idea of like that mentality of bootstrapping, keeping the sort of efficient, sustainable bottom line, taking care of our customers. Like the headlines, I think over the last couple of years have sort of distorted reality of like the fact that business is supposed to be, it's all about that.
Mhm.
And so, I think there's some optimism in that, in your personal story as well. And that like, there's a return to the fundamentals kind of happening right now. And there's something, hopefully for companies that have a good product, they have, great product market fit, and a good base of customers that will emerge even stronger kind of through these conversations.
And that's where I think, like when you look at the DNA or like how we've scaled out, the functional area of organizations for, again, like the last decade, like largely it's been about defining what the least common denominator was that role did, and then putting a really superficial metric on that, right? Like, so if you were in customer success, your goal was to get everyone onboarded in like less than 30 days. And onboarding meant like you did these 6 things, right? And then you were in the green and you're kind of off to the races. As you get more fundamental, like I'll use that term fundamental in terms of like trying to look around and see if something is really healthy, right? Which is really difficult to do with like a cookie cutter hire. And so like I was having this conversation the other day actually with Jared Fuller from Partner Hacker and now Reveal. I don't even know what his business card says right now, but the roles that we're hiring for, like either we have to do a really good job at enabling them with kind of this new perspective, or we're just going to have to get really entrepreneurial in who we're hiring for in the short term to try to, find folks that can care a bit deeper than whatever that KPI is historically on the dashboard that says, all right, I'm done at the end of the day, right? Because whether it's partnerships or sales or marketing, customer success, across the board, like you fundamentally need to realize like your impact on that business's growth model now, and understand how you're going to go just a little bit deeper into ensuring that true goal is hit, and not some of those kind of superficial markers that I think we put out there that are actually detrimental.
So good.
I love what you said, Anthony, and I've actually heard you say it, Justin, that business is supposed to be hard. And I've actually heard Justin on the phone speaking to somebody, or maybe it was a podcast. He said the old tricks aren't working. All the easy go-to-market strategies and cheat codes are gone. They've gone by the way of the dodo. And so, what is the new frontier? Obviously there's, it used to be, let's throw SDRs at a problem. We all watch Jason Lemkin for as creative content as he does put out, but it's like, we all read the same blogs. We all know SaaS math, but I mean, is that still applicable? Right. And where do you feel like the next efficiencies are to be gained?
I'm pretty biased, but I don't think I'd be sort of betting my career on this if I didn't have conviction that the changing tides, I think, are just taking, we're relooking at the way relationships are built between companies and audiences or customers ultimately, and how we sort of acquire customers is being changing. Traditionally, if you looked at the marketing kind of budget from a program spend perspective, paid media is oftentimes the biggest line item in the marketing budget. It's also the one that's the hardest to defend when FP&A comes around with the red pen. And what you can do, and I think some of Justin, when you were talking about kind of the vanity metrics in a way around marketing, is you can kind of game the system with paid media, build like this amazing landing page and it's optimized for conversion, and you can drive a bunch of early funnel. But that cohort isn't typically the cohort of pipeline that ends up converting, or if it does, not the one that ends up being the sort of like, a high LTV cohort of revenue over time. So I think that what's being rewritten is how we acquire customers. And it's not sort of through some of these transactional channels that we've used before, or even, and a lot of this is my belief, but through some of these rented channels like SEO and other elements that we've sort of been beholden to other third parties in order to get that distribution between us and our brand and our audience. So my belief is owned media is that the answer. Reason for that, our ability to leverage rented channels like social media. Here we are on LinkedIn right now, in order to get our message across to an audience, but then to get folks to build a more direct relationship with us, to subscribe to our thought leadership. That there's an opportunity to build our first party data set of people who care about the topics that our brand is out here resourcing and evangelizing. And through that, with a first party data set and no intermediary for distribution, we can start engaging our audience with more streams just like this one, more blog posts, more events, more videos. And through that, get a sense of who's actually in market and who's leaning into the topics that we're talking about versus folks that are, just content consumers and not actually potential customers. So the reason I have conviction behind this is it's a lot cheaper for us to do this. It's a lot cheaper for us to do streams, write some content, launch a podcast, than it is to just pump, several $100,000 a month or whatever into search marketing and hope for the best on the other side of that form fill. So it's efficient, but it's also helping us solve some of the data problems that we get in terms of actually building that audience and understanding engagement in a way that we can actually deliver value to them through our marketing effort. So I'll stop talking because I'm obviously super biased and can talk all day about this, but I think this is sort of the next wave of marketing behind the PLG motion and some of these others, is this idea of building an audience that you sort of have a direct relationship with.
Well, David, I'll go back to kind of what you led with there. Fundamentally, I don't believe that there's, we're devoid of cheats. I'm a firm believer in cheating. I think it's there's always a way to do something but cheating needs to be qualified as well because it has such a negative connotation. There's always a way to do something better and with less resistance and more pragmatic than what the general group is doing, right? But I do believe that the easy problems have been solved, right? And largely money is a way to hopscotch and kind of jump over some of those barriers. But what you also saw, when you are doing that through traditional demand generation, or again across the last 10, 15 years, that's been a quicker route to a potential customer relationship oftentimes, but it hasn't been sustainable. It hasn't been something that's kind of weathered the test of time. I think you saw some of that in COVID. You're seeing a lot of that now as folks started to evaluate, am I getting $6 back for this dollar that I'm spending? And if not, if that value isn't there, if that trust isn't there, if the relationship isn't there, that was, really fickle customer relationship at the end of the day, right? And so across the board, I'll get back to kind of the cheat comment, relationships and value are the two primary pillars there. We have to get access to trust through relationships, either directly or through a curated network of individuals that I would normally call partners. You also have to be demonstrating value. One without the other never happens, right? It's when, if someone comes to you and says hey, I need a new accountant, refer me over to someone, and you send someone over and they're terrible. It doesn't matter that's my best friend in the world and I provided a relationship. They're not going to see that. So I think that, the partnership angle and what we're calling partner-led growth has a place across the board here. I think it's got a place in content, in media. I think it's got a place in direct sales. I think it's got a place in marketing. For me, it kind of becomes a distributed layer across the business. And that's also where I think it gets a bit difficult. And that's where that entrepreneurship comment comes from earlier. You have to have someone that can see the value in curating the right group of people. Who are they, right? Not just a list that's on some marketplace and a website, but really what's the customer struggling with? What's the value I can bring to them? How can I kind of bring together this curated group of folks that maybe already have access to that customer relationship I'm trying to garner? And how can I kind of move those chess pieces around the board intentionally so that I can pass some of that trust, some of that relationship to me, and then I have to provide value, right? At the end of the day, and I think this goes to Anthony's comment earlier, everyone's struggling with top line growth right now. A lot of people struggling with, shoring up the bottom line as well. So you've got a really well advertised problem. If you have a solution that can solve something there and you can provide real value, your challenge is, number one, to put that forward, right? This is the old dichotomy of I can't wait until you've signed on the dotted line to start giving you value. I have to give you that right up front. But what alleviates that barrier of having that first conversation? I think that's relationship, right? Like, so, to Anthony's point, if you're putting out great content that has, value forward aspects to it, you're solving someone's problem for no money whatsoever. It's just value add. And you can bring in someone that has access to the audience you want to put that in front of. That's how you layer in that partnership motion, right? Like, now you're able to kind of, hack your way into a conversation there. And then it's your job to fulfill on that promise. And I just see that, applicable across the board, across go-to-market and across customer relationship.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think a common theme just from listening to both of y'all's view on the market, the commonality between the two is just intentionality with kind of how you're working and really sharpening the pencil and getting closer to the customer as opposed to just kind of cashing checks and, I guess
throwing out an email and a campaign, right? Like,
right.
we got the ability to hit a button and have widespread impact just became so easy. Like, I think about like 2 decades ago when I got started in marketing, how hard it was just to get a message out without like contracting with an agency or, buying, physical space and so on. Like, now that's so easy. And with that, all of those, potential downsides come with it, right? Like, if you've got a really crappy message, like, there's a very low barrier to someone seeing your really crappy message.
Yeah.
And so I think that's that's what has kind of gotten a bit out of control in marketing and even outbound sales.
What's kind of cool is I love this point of view, Justin. And I think that what partners give you too, beyond just access to their audiences and that intentionality around who we partner with in order to get that story told, I think is the brand equity that they build, that they bring to the table. We're a very small company. We're pre-product. We haven't announced everything, but in working with companies who are 2, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead, they're sort of indirectly validating our existence as a brand, and almost like granting us access and permission into their audience through that. We're a better company because of the partners that are wrapped around us. So I just think that's so interesting, going certainly from an audience acquisition perspective, but I think in general, going back to your point on value and relationships, like, how do you leverage others within your ecosystem in order to help you tell a better value added story, as well as marry that with the relationships that you're able to now reach through them.
Yep. Yeah, I think the other thing, on that value add topic, or value, what I call hyper value, like bringing something not a pure absence of expectation, but bringing something knowing that this is the right fit partner. They have that trust relationship with individuals that I want to talk to or form client relationships with, right? Like, the ability to pay off that promise is something that is actually shocking to most buyers still. Even though, like, we've all heard the stats on, buyers demand more and they want personalization and they want value. The actual payoff of that value is still pretty rare. Like, the ability for someone to reach out to you and say, hey, I know that you're struggling with this. I know this is your market. I know, these are the variables that play there, and this is going to be a big help to you. And to actually have that be a big help is a pretty shocking experience, even today. And so I think if you can play on that, and that goes into, like, partnerships, like, I've been a part of many enterprise, level partnerships to where these are big programs. I'm supposed to feel lucky just by being a partner in the program. In fact, I pay, annually to be in that program, and to the tune of, high 5 and 6 figures, right? That is, I think, what needs to fundamentally change with this whole approach, to where if you're seeking out a partnership or you're growing a partner ecosystem, you should be looking at how you can provide value to those partners as a form of building even that partnership relationship. And that's something that I just tried to do personally as well. Like, if I'm making an intro, I don't want anything, for myself from that, but I want to show value to the people that ultimately I know will have value to my business or me personally or whatever. And so the more I can just put that up there with no advertised expectation, I think that's what's going to allow a lot of these, what have been the "what have you done for me lately" relationships, like, you're in this program, to give me your client list and to to provide referrals. Like, yeah, that would be great. We'd all love referrals, right? But like, when's the last time that you ever saw like a big global enterprise software organization like intentionally giving value to their partners with no expectation in return? And I think that's going to become a really interesting, again, cheat or a hack to building a more sustainable, more valuable partner ecosystem versus the pay for play. I'm here because I need the logo on my website, and the check I cut to you every year is the most painful one that I stroke, right? So I think there's just a lot of interesting shifts in mindset that translate to a lot of different tactical outcomes that have that intentional approach that you mentioned, David.
Yeah, and first thought is, how do you scale that? Everyone's going to say that, but these are one of the business motions that probably don't need to be scaled, right? Because you're getting scale through that partnership and that distribution. So being more intentional is the key. How would you say, Anthony, would you go about diagnosis? Because you're coming to a partner, if you're an earlier stage company, generally you're going to a company that's probably more established and has more infrastructure. How do you go about wrapping up a value proposition where you can give them something? Like, how do you diagnose those problems and say, hey, I know what you're doing, this is what I'm going to give you, and not respect or receive anything in return? I'd love to know kind of thoughts on that.
It's a really good question. I'm smiling because like we just did this, and in many cases I'm like, I don't know why they want to work with us, but I'm very happy that they did. And I imagine for a lot of earlier stage companies, that's kind of the emotion versus being on the other side where it's like, gosh, do we take a chance on this brand? Like, who should we be surrounding ourselves with? What I have found, at least again, in now being on this side of that conversation, is, what are the unfair advantages that we can flex to bring things to the table? We're super scrappy, we're super young, and we're willing to do things that are not, the kind of the grunt work, I guess, of a co-marketing campaign. I'll bring up an example of a roadshow that we're doing with 2+ partners that are, several stages ahead of us. We offered, we'll do all of the logistics of the event. We'll find the venue, we'll get the speakers, we'll build a website, we'll create the email templates, like we'll get the dinner reservation afterwards, whatever. We'll do all of that.
I love that.
Because we've got like, I've done events before, and, we feel just pretty comfortable kind of with some of that parts of the job. Like, all we're asking for you is to promote the event into your audience. So going back to the idea of like accessing their audience in partnership, you bring a speaker, we'll take care of the rest, and, help us offset some of this expense. Let's just split it 3 ways. And from their perspective, and again, I'll admit, there's a little bit of a relationship beforehand as I was a CMO at other companies, but from their perspective, they're like, we get a 3-city road show and virtual, we just have to write a check and show up. That's great. Like, we'll do it. Oh, we'll send a couple emails, we'll add it to our newsletter, we'll tweet about it, that sort of thing. Sure. That's awesome. And from our perspective, like, holy crap, we got these awesome companies that are helping validate our existence and helping validate the story that we're bringing to market. And we get to grow our audience, and we don't have to foot the bill for this whole thing. So, and if you're watching, Mutiny Clear, super excited to be working with you guys. But that's, I think, the assessment that we made is like, well, why would they? Like, we're so young, we can't get that many people into the event. What we can do is hustle. What we can do is lean on our strength, which is event production and logistics and all that, and make it as easy for them to say yes as possible.
It's funny because we very consistently for years ran that exact same play with a large enterprise software provider that rhymes with Adobe, because they're, like, obviously, like, they've got the capital put behind something. Their challenge is logistics, right? Like, there's so many layers, and frankly, they've got, a small partner marketing team that's assigned, hundreds of partners that they have to support, and they get requests all the time. And the request is always kind of this 50-50 or, along the lines of, the money allocation. And we used to come in and say, we will take care of all of those logistics, right? Like, we'll manage the outbound, which, it's funny when you get into large organizations, even, getting alignment internally on what system they're going to send a message out of is a pain in the butt, right? Like, no, it's owned by customer marketing or, demand generation or whatever. So, like, don't worry about any of that stuff. Like, we will handle all of that. What I need you to do is bring, a handful of in pipeline, deals to this Boston Red Sox game that we're going to sponsor, right? And just make it easy to say yes in that regard, because at the end of the day, I don't care about if I'm getting relief. Normally, like if you're a scrappy organization that's got lots of people that can pivot their chair and build a campaign in Marketo or outreach or whatever it happens to be, like we've got that covered. What I don't have is that relationship. And so that's squarely what I want from you. Like, let's make it easy to say yes and on all things otherwise.
That's good.
Awesome. I'm going to allow the audience, if they have any questions, to just drop it in the chat box before I ask the next question. But if I was to surmise this whole conversation, and I'd like to get your feedback to early stage founders who had the mentality and the mantra of grow, 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 spend, 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 the headline of this topic would be stop, be intentional, and lean into your customers. What else am I, is that correct? One, and B, what else should people be thinking about? How else should they be approaching their customers? What hacks can they, or cheats can they incorporate around go-to-market? How should they address their board, et cetera?
Yeah, I think, like it's hard to argue with the fact that everything stems from knowledge of the customer, right? But like where people, I think, fall down there is like, what does that tactically mean? Especially if you're super early stage and maybe you've got like a very small cohort of customers. But like you do have to get out, and this is what we do with portfolio companies in terms of building an ideal partner profile. Like that's all based on like deep knowledge of the existing customer cohort or folks that look like that ICP, right? And so if you can get in there and you can understand who do they already trust, how are they solving, the problem that you solve or the rungs around that problem, and really use that inside data to then go say, all right, I'm going to build my potential partner list from that. I'm going to look at these channels where they're going. I'm going to, create this type of content that answers those questions. I mean, it's pretty basic, but for some reason, the further we get out from that rung of like early, scrappy, small team where information, is very easy to gather, we use that word scale. And I fielded the question that you asked there, David, so many times with it doesn't, and that's good, right? Because at the end of the day, like you need to keep that insight. And so it doesn't mean that you can't build large organizations and matrix teams and so on. It just means that you have to be really intentional about passing that knowledge of the customer into every single one of those aspects of the business. And I think keep people rooted in KPIs that matter. Because marketing is probably one of the biggest offenders there, certainly, to where we started measuring leads, we started finishing the race way before the finish line there. And it created these false economies within businesses. So like the more that you can keep people attached to those two things, the customer and, actual results that matter. And then again, weave that in throughout the organization in ways that your customers actually tell you to. I think the tactics kind of start to evolve from that understanding and the pass of that knowledge.
Yeah. I'm going to quote Justin Gray today and potentially forevermore. Marketing is about value and relationships. And if that is the sort of true north that we can bring into the planning offsites, into the boardroom, into the executive conversations, I think companies early stage or otherwise will be really well suited for making a big impact. And so I love what you're saying about intentionality guiding that versus some of the trade kind of practices we've had historically, just biasing our ideas or kind of the campaigns we're bringing to the table. The gift of marketing is the ability to scale relationship building. I think if your CEO could go be in front of a customer or a stage or a mic like this all day, every day across the world, that's probably the best thing for the company, is to start building that one-on-one trust. Through marketing, we can help scale through streams like this one, through some other type of content. So I'd be thinking about how can you leverage the brand equity of your leadership team? How can you leverage the learnings from customers that have now turned into your broader kind of messaging or the kind of methodology that your company is sort of putting together? Then how can you use channels in an efficient way to actually scale awareness of that methodology to help provide value to an industry that is all, to your point, David, it's all struggling together right now. That's, I think, how I would think about getting started, but it's going back to the root of this whole game, value creation and building relationships.
Yeah, on that value creation note, like I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, because I always do such a great job at bashing old marketing and sales metrics, but like sometimes I forget to like provide what I think is actually the new true North Star, and that is the capture and definition and measurement of value through the client's eyes, right? And so like I've talked about this a lot through different mediums, but like what we used to do at LeadMD is actually record what is the, we call them outcomes. What is the outcome that client is looking to yield as a result of, why did they sign on the dotted line with us? And if you go one layer deep, it's always, we want to do this by X date. You've got to keep going into the organization and kind of build that outcome to the point where you get to something that like is talked about in a boardroom at that organization. And normally it's like, well, we need to, in this environment, we need to, lower our customer acquisition costs by 40%. We need to increase lifetime value by, 20%, 30%, whatever it happens to be. Okay, great. Those are two outcomes there. Those are two KPIs. And if you can record that KPI in the sales process and pass it through, the rest of that buying process, the customer onboarding process, the customer relationship process, and use that as your, all right, when we started this relationship 6 months ago, this is what you wanted to achieve. We are now 60% of the way towards that goal. Like just even speaking in those customer terms and being able to show like concrete movement towards something that actually matters, I think is, again, something that would be so shocking to large cohorts of customers. And it's such a simple thing to do, and it does scale because you could systematize it. And it keeps everyone focused on, again, what a true North Star looks like, rather than what used to be my problem. I'd walk out in the bullpen and I'd say, where are we at with that project for, fill in the blank? Oh, I'm building their lead scoring methodology. Like, so what? Like, what do they want to do with that? Like, what ultimately are they, what is success to them? Why would they, be clamoring to write us another check? That's a much harder understanding to yield without having that kind of centralized record of what it was that got everyone excited to start with.
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much for coming on. We're going to wrap it up. So on a closing, where can people reach you? How can, you provide value to anyone listening? What's the best way to get in contact?
Yeah, I can start. AudiencePlus.com. If you subscribe there, we're producing a lot of content just like this, talking about efficient growth through the lens of owned media. So I think that's the best place. Or on LinkedIn here, just we're probably somewhere here. You can click on us to follow or send us a note.
Yeah, I'll give you my address. Everyone write this down. Send me a letter. No, inrevenue.capital, or on LinkedIn, I'm /inrevenue there as well. Would love to connect and again, answer questions, provide value, get feedback. Thank you.
Awesome. And then anything to plug? Anything coming up? You guys got an event coming up pretty soon if you're in the Phoenix area?
We do. April 11th. So we're Anthony and I will both be there. We're partnered with Battery Ventures, with Phoenix Ventures, and we're doing a workshop that essentially is what we've talked about here from a very tactical standpoint. How do we translate these new, or take advantage of these new efficient growth channels in a way that folks can deploy, within their own business.
That's gonna be awesome.
Awesome. Yep. And guys, I have a podcast. It's not that good, but if you want to listen to it, it's called The Capital Stack. It's on all your major platforms. And I have a Substack going on. If you want to reach me, pretty active on LinkedIn. So anyway, thank you guys so much for coming, and we will see you next month for another LinkedIn Live. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.